Roman, I'm devastated. Devastated, I say, because the 2020 Ford F-250 with the 7.3-liter Godzilla, which is actually should be called King Kong engine, is weak sauce.
All right, Nathan, no, you are wrong. And not about the Godzilla part. Yeah, you're right. It should be called King Kong because the GT already exists.
Yeah, right.
But the engine is not weak sauce. It is exactly what it should be. And the reason you're wrong is because we actually put down $55,000 of our hard-earned money to buy one. So, guys, in this video, we're going to go over why Nathan is wrong and I am right.
It could be the other way around.
And we want you to let us know what you think in the comments below. But let's start with the stock figures.
Yeah, the stock figures first.
So Ford announced these a few months ago, and basically the engine puts out, according to Ford, at the crank, 430 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 475 pound-foot of torque at 4,000 RPM.
Those are good numbers.
Those are good numbers. Now, the reason we're doing this video is because today, Andre put out a video, it's right there, on TFL Truck, where our friends at 5-Star went and actually dynoed. Yep, they put the truck on the dyno, and the numbers they came out with were, well, a little different.
A little?
All right, let's look at the maximum power in the 7.3. So we saw at the wheels about, what, 360 average?
About 360 and about 407, 408 average torque.
Average maximum torque. So we're over 400 at the wheels. As far as the graph is concerned, what does that look like?
Well, what we did here is we hit the mile per hour limit.
358 horsepower. Now this is measuring at the wheel, not the crank. All right, so there is some parasitic loss, but we'll get to that in a second. And 407.3 pound-feet of torque. Yeah, that's considerable. That means that at horsepower, it says 16.7% loss. That's negative 72 horsepower. And a 14.3% loss of torque. That's a 68 pound-feet of torque loss.
Now, of course, that's parasitic loss.
That's parasitic loss, but in many cases, it's around 10%. That's like, oh, that's not great. This is a lot higher than that.
Yeah, so let me explain, guys. When the manufacturer puts out numbers, they actually dyno the engine at the crank. When aftermarket tuners do that, they use a dyno. And there's parasitic loss between what happens at the engine and what happens at the wheels where it's actually sitting on the dyno. So if you want to see that video, head on over to TFL Truck and you can see what happened and how they dynoed it. Now, yes, of course the loss is
devastating.
A little greater, but Nathan, I'm going to put this to you. Dynos are more of an art than a science.
Okay, to be fair, you never quite get the same exact results because there's so many things that play into it. However, unacceptable.
Actually, it's worse than that, Nathan. You can have, there's two dynos, right? There's a Mustang and a dyno jet.
Yeah.
You can have two dynos and the two identical trucks or the same truck, put them on the dyno, and you'll get two different numbers. You can have the same operator and you'll get two different numbers. I mean, that's why in Andre's video, it's a comparison between the old truck and the new truck.
But once again, I'm coming back to the same thing, that these numbers are extremely low.
All right, let's talk about low numbers, all right? So, first of all, when Ford put out the 7.3, which I applaud them, by the way, it's an old school pushrod V8.
It is old school.
Right? There's none of this fangled new direct injection, two-port injection, right? It doesn't have any of that. Dual cam, it's just a good old-fashioned American big block V8, right? And what they told me, and I think it's actually the right thing, they wanted longevity, right? They wanted an engine that will last for the life of the truck, whatever that happens to be. These are work trucks, right? The F-250 is a classic work truck, and so they want it to last long. And the second you start putting all this fancy stuff onto it that increases horsepower, you immediately decrease longevity.
You know, you say that, but they still do that with a lot of their other engines. Think about the EcoBoost engine. I mean, we're talking about a twin turbocharged V6 that's direct injected and blah, blah, blah. And Ford says that those are super reliable engines. So my point of view is, why not take that type of technology, add it to something like their new big block, and thus have more horsepower?
One word, Nathan: reliability. When Ford came out with that EcoBoost 3.5 liter, there was all kinds of issues, right? I mean, there are more intercoolers on that thing than there are on all of our refrigerators combined. I mean, it's crazy, right? You've got so much pressure in the engine. You've got so much cooling that has to go on. With this 7.3, you have a reliable engine that even though it doesn't put out King Kong-like numbers, it does put out big enough numbers, and it will last, and it will be reliable.
All right, I guess, maybe, no. I see, technology should be aimed at making things last longer. So having higher compression ratio numbers and everything else seems like a more logical thing. Now, I'm not talking about diesels here. I'm talking about gas engines, and they're doing more of that. So the 7.3 is kind of archaic in that respect.
All right, let me give you another number. 10, as in 10-speed. Now, the 7.3 is specifically paired to the new 10-speed transmission so that you get the best of both worlds, right? You get the old school reliability and longevity, and you get the new school fuel economy because now you've got a 10-speed that's paired to it. So you've got a really great combination of old school V8 pushrod, big block, and new 10-speed technology.
I'm not going to argue that the 10-speed is not a good transmission. It is a good transmission. I think that it's one of the smoothest ones out there. However, do you think that the 10-speed is responsible for the parasitic loss that led to those numbers? I don't think it's really the whole thing. I think that Ford set out to build an engine that might be reliable, but is incredibly weak in certain areas.
All right, so let me answer that question, all right? First and foremost, it may be a little underpowered for 7.3 liters, but you can supercharge it. You know you can supercharge it, right? It's old school tech that you could slap a big old supercharger on and get double those numbers, maybe even triple those numbers. Okay, maybe I'm being a little exaggerated, but you could easily, with a supercharger, get 200 to 300 more horsepower, and it's been done before, and it's done reliably, easily, and cost-effectively.
Okay, so we're talking about Ford, the company that's known for forced induction. They do twin turbocharged engines all over the place, and yet, when they could have had a Tremor produce gobs of horsepower to make it into this monster beast, and put a supercharger on it, like you said, they didn't do it. They don't have it available. It is not part of their parts bin. There are no superchargers or turbochargers available for that 7.3.
Yeah, but Magnuson will come along and build one.
Okay.
Just give it 2 months. The other thing I want to say about the 10-speed is it's very fuel efficient. So, you know, the numbers aren't out there because, of course, heavy-duty trucks aren't rated for fuel economy.
Right.
And we did an MPG loop with it.
Right.
I'm not going to give you that number yet because you'll have to stay tuned. We're not going to give everything away.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, Nathan, that right now driving our truck around, both highway and city, we're getting 13.7 MPG, which is more than we were getting with the old Raptor, which had the old 6.2. So with the 7.3 hauling around a big-ass 7,000-pound heavy-duty truck, we're getting 13.7 MPG, and that's pretty darn good.
I'm not going to argue that point. I was actually really impressed when I heard that. But once again, I still say that this engine shouldn't have this type of drop. And even though it is proving to be somewhat economical, I'm curious to see whether or not this reliability thing is actually part of this whole equation.
All right, let me give you another thing.
All right.
Another argument. Price, right? It's cost effective. Ours was expensive, and we had to pay pretty much close to sticker for it. We get a little bit off. I mean, most people get a lot more than we, but we needed to buy it for tax reasons by the end of the year.
Right.
Ford had just started shipping them. We found one that meet our criteria in the state. So, you know, we paid close to, I think, 53 when it was all said and done on the $55,000 trucks. Most people, you guys know, can get a much greater discount on that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying that. But let's say that the average Super Duty XLT is what, 50, 45-ish, right?
Let's say 50.
Right? That's a $2,000 upgrade for that 7.3, you know, from the smaller V8. And if we're talking about the diesel, Nathan, it's an $8,000 discount, right? Because the diesel costs $10,000 more. The 7.3 is only $2,000 more, so it's $8K less than the diesel.
I can't argue that point. That is probably the most logical part of building this new engine, is the fact that a lot of people out there cannot afford a diesel. Diesels are more expensive to maintain. In some cases, they're more expensive to fuel. It's not an easy engine to live with in that respect. So I get that point, and I agree that the 7.3 is a bit of a bargain. if it produced the numbers that Ford said it produced.
I'm going to go with this is a swan song for the old American big block pushrod V8. I am over the moon that they built it. I think it's going to be reliable. It's going to be dependable. It's going to be long-lived. It's going to be superchargeable. It's going to be fuel efficient. It's going to be cost efficient. What more do you want? Nathan, no, you are wrong.
You heard it here, folks. Roman's wrong. And once again, remember, Andre put out that video on TFL Truck. It's out there. It's got all the numbers, all the testing. Check it out.
Yeah, and if you're waiting for more videos, we've got so many more coming, so please stay tuned for those.